Until the 1950s, America was a segregated society with separate schools, restaurants, parks, and water fountains for blacks and whites. In 1954, the Supreme Court rules that schools must be integrated. Resistance to this ruling spreads through southern states. As 9 black students attempt to enter Little Rock Central High School, Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus orders his National Guard to stop them.
My hometown was only 50 miles from Little Rock. We had a large African-American community. The schools were all segregated. It was a period, though, of basic calm and optimism in the aftermath of World War II. And I think that's really what laid the seeds of people wanting to have more activism from government at home and to do something about civil rights. After Brown v. Board of Education, Little Rock Central High School crisis was the first major resistance test. And I believed in integration, and so did my grandparents, and so did my mother. And I was appalled, but also surprised by the resistance that built up. I just turned 11. Eisenhower was the first president that I felt that I knew and had a connection to. And my family were all Democrats, but we liked him. He went out of his way not to raise the country's temperature. When you know you have the authority to do something and you're determined to do it and see it through, then it's better to talk more softly. It's better to be resolute without being arrogant. It was the right thing to do. It had to be done. The courts had ordered it, and these kids had a right to an equal education.
For a few minutes this evening, I should like to speak to you about the serious situation that has arisen in Little Rock. Disorderly mobs have deliberately prevented the carrying out of proper orders from a federal court. This morning, the mob again gathered in front of the Central High School of Little Rock. I have today issued an executive order directing the use of troops under federal authority to aid in the execution of federal law at Little Rock, Arkansas. The very basis of our individual rights and freedoms rests upon the certainty that the President and the executive branch of government will support and ensure the carrying out of the decisions of the federal courts, even when necessary, with all the means at the President's command. Mob rule cannot be allowed to override the decisions of our courts. If resistance to the federal court order ceases at once, the further presence of federal troops will be unnecessary, and the city of Little Rock will return to its normal habits of peace and order. Thus will be restored the image of America and of all its parts as one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What came across to me was he just said he wasn't going to tolerate it. The Supreme Court had made a decision. The law of the land had to be upheld, and the kids were going to get to go to school. This was a huge strategic decision because nationalizing the Arkansas National Guard to stop Faubus from using them to keep the kids out, and then bringing in the 101st Airborne Division was pretty unprecedented in America. Had President Eisenhower not done that, he would have basically said, the Supreme Court doesn't really count if there's enough powerful opposition, that we can have 2 sets of laws, one for people who don't live in the South and one for people who do. It would have been unthinkable. And in the end, I think that's why he did what he did. He realized that as fraught with potential negative ramifications as his action was, the flip side was much, much worse. It was really the first time the country got to see him handling a crisis of the magnitude that he dealt with in his leadership in World War II. I learned a lot about how people who are determined to prevail do it without going out of their way to humiliate their adversaries or claim too much momentary credit. He knew that the record would be written in the legacy of the lives of the kids that went to school. And so he treated it in a much more matter-of-fact way than many people in the same circumstances might have. And it was a confidence builder, I think, for the rest of the country, too. People who were just looking on and had never seen anything like this before. Dwight Eisenhower made a decision that he had a legal, constitutional obligation that if America was going to be a nation of laws, he had to do this. That was a big deal. A lot of other politicians said the courts can say whatever they want, where are their police, where are their armies, where are their whatever. Eisenhower didn't do that, and he deserves our gratitude for it. Secondly, he used his federal power to advance the cause of equal opportunity. And even though we've had lots of ups and downs and the issue continues to roil the country, we were then clearly started on a path of equality before the law and increased contact with one another. That's really what kept the whole thing from sparking an enormous reaction that tore the country apart. And he did the right thing. He was used to making big decisions, and he made most of them right, including this one.